Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Transylvania Lectures, organized by MCC. Today's topic is Gender Equality's Digital Frontier, Navigating AI's Gender Bias. My name is David Sós, student in the senior program here at MCC. I have the honor of introducing our guest. Today's speaker is Karen Pesse, a digital advisor, diversity and gender equality activist who uses technology to address societal challenges. Karen Pesse is a globally recognized leader in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Throughout her career, she has received approximately 20 awards and honors, and she encourages women to break through traditional corporate barriers. She is the founder of the social project DiversiBe, which addresses unattended social issues while creating job opportunities for women, minorities, and marginalized groups living in Belgium. As a female business leader in Europe, Karen Pesse places a particular emphasis on raising awareness about gender discrimination in the fields of technology, healthcare, and the banking sector. Her goal is to shed light on the dangers of data-driven society and the consequences of the lack of female representation. While her expertise, with her expertise, she offers valuable insights into partnerships between governments and organizations, showcasing progressive developments in the public administration and digitalization. The discussion will be moderated by Dr. Lehet Csatú, professor at DiversiBe University, Faculty of Mathematics and Computer Science. Please welcome to the stage Karen Pesse and Dr. Lehet Csatú.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Before we go into the chat, I prepared a small presentation for you. The ones that watch my TEDx will already know quite a few of the things that I'm mentioning here, but for ones that didn't, I hope this information will shock you in a positive way and will engage you into this topic as well. But before I start, I would like to interact a little bit with the audience. So first of all, I would like you to raise your hands if you think that hurricane names like Catherine or Cindy sound more aggressive than hurricane names like Andrew or Henry. So this Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Cindy, do they sound more aggressive than hurricane names like Henry or Andrew? Raise your hands if you think so. Yeah, raise your hands if you don't think so. No, Henry and Andrew sound more aggressive. Well, I'm sorry to inform you, but this is all BS. There's nothing to do with how aggressive they are. Hurricane names are a predefined list and it goes from A to Z. But what some researchers are studying is the effect of hurricane names on how society perceived these hurricanes. So what happened, and this is some research that has been back and forth and a lot of people are paying attention to it now, that when hurricanes with a female name are coming, people tend to underestimate them much more than a hurricane that has a male name. And what happens is that finally people don't prepare as well as they should. And this speech here and the whole conversation has much more to do with bias, which is in fact the point that I would like to talk about today. And essentially, for those that are not very acquainted with the word, bias is a preconception. It's mostly an unconscious error in the information that you have and the way that you think, and this will affect your conclusion very likely. And this is largely used in a negative context. And bias has never been a bad thing. Actually, bias comes from evolution. Imagine if you are in cave time and you come out of your cave and you see a bear and you feel fear, and your mind is going to make you biased that every time you get out of your cave you need to be careful, and every time you see a bear you need to run. But the problem is that we are not in cave times anymore, and bias is still in our minds, and especially unconscious bias, which are the ones that we are not aware about. Imagine if you're growing up in a household and people at your house are constantly saying these people are bad, these people are not to be trusted, and you grow up with this image and you don't check and you don't make any effort to connect with these people, and finally you grow up to be someone which has this biased image, which is very often not necessarily true. And the thing about bias is a bit of a summary of what I'm going to be talking about today. Bias is something that when you're interacting with people and when you're having actions, these biased actions are going to have consequences, and they are very likely going to be documented in the way of information, documented in the way of data. And finally, now we are working with artificial intelligence, we're working with machine learning models. This is all based on data. So basically, our interactions, our biased interactions towards people, they are being documented and they are being fed into artificial intelligence models, into machine learning models, and they're being spread around everywhere. So actually, most of what I talk about today is not precisely the dangers of AI, but the dangers of our biased society, which eventually caused bias in AI, which eventually caused the dangers of bias in AI. But this was kind of a recap. Don't worry, I know I went a little bit too fast. I am going to walk you through history first before we deep dive into this topic. So first of all, I don't know if you know about it, but in the 1940s and in the 1950s, IT was a female-dominated industry. Yes, ICT and STEM was women's stuff. In the 1950s, most of people working in IT were women, and in fact, the word computers actually come from women computers. Just like a teacher is teaching, a computer is computing. So actually the word computer comes from the women that were working, computing things manually. And computing was huge amongst women. It was something that's changed around the 60s, but until then, it was mostly seen as something essentially female. They were saying that it was for women that had more attention to detail and they were much more careful with the way they were computing things. And even with other industries like manufacturing, for example, around the 1940s, you started to have a lot of wars and you started to have the Industrial Revolution, and men had to go to the army. And actually women started to pick up where men left, and they were doing all the ballistic calculations, and they were constructing airplanes, and they were really everywhere in jobs that were essentially male dominated. And it's not as if women couldn't do it, it's just that women never had the place to do it. And it's interesting, well, one addition to my TEDx is after I gave this TEDx, the CEO of a company which is building ships came to me and said, you know, I once went to a country and everyone in the shipyard were women. And I thought it was so different because in Europe you think about shipyard and construction and it's such a male thing. And they said, no, we actually looked into the data and we realized that women are much better with constructing ships. And now all our shipyards are full of women, which are dealing with these machines and which are doing a much better job. And I was really like, okay, I'm for sure going to include that fact, of course, after I checked, into the keynotes that I give. So yeah, women were everywhere. And then what happened then? Because I don't think that anyone would think about IT being a female-dominated environment today. What happens is that around the 1960s, IT really started to pick up and started to be something that was really out there and giving a lot of money, and women were notoriously pushed out of leadership because women were notoriously the ones taking care of the house and not climbing through the social ladder of corporates and factories. And finally, it was frustrating, and they just started to go back to house duties because they were being pushed out of leadership. Finally, with the wars ending, men were mostly coming back from the army, and they were picking up these jobs again. And then one of the interesting data that I found is that even in the 1980s, you still had 37% of the bachelors in IT being women. But according to Eurostat, by 2016, it's only 18%. So the fact that women started to be pushed out of IT and pushed out of STEM, and they didn't have role models anymore, and they even started to see this a bit like, yeah, this is not something for women anymore, really pushed them out of the industry. And this eventually caused very dangerous inequalities. But before we move forward, I have a quiz for you, because I heard that you are all the best students of the region, so of course I'm going to challenge you on that. I would like to ask, please, all of you that can stand up. So we're going to do a quiz. So, first question. We're talking about Columbia University. I hope you know Columbia University is one of the biggest universities in the United States, founded in 1754. When did they start accepting women? Was it in the 1847? Was it in 1920, 1964, or 1983? Who thinks it was the 1920s? Please raise your hand. You can sit. Who thinks it was the 1964? You can sit. Who thinks it was the 1983? All of you with your hands up can stay up. The rest, please sit. And you continue for the next phase. Columbia University was founded in 1754, but only started accepting women in 1983. Well, let's talk about barriers to get into high university, right? And what about when did women participation became mandatory in clinical trials in the US National Institute of Health? So basically, before this date, it was not mandatory to test drugs that are put in the pharmacy in women's bodies, only men. Was it in the 1953? Please raise your hand. 1994, raise your hand. So those that didn't raise your hand can sit. It was in the 1994. So basically before 1994, it was not mandatory to test any medicine on women's bodies in the United States. And the final question, I used to put 5 questions, but typically nobody lasts in the end, so now I'm very kind, I'm only putting 3 questions. What is the average share of women in cloud computing and engineering? Who thinks is 16 and 25%? Raise your hands. Can sit. 12 and 15? You can sit. So congratulations to you 3. You made it out of the quiz. But yeah, I think with this data you start to understand that it hasn't been very easy historically, because women were pushed out of academia, women were pushed out of university, women were pushed out of clinical trials, which means that more women had severe consequences, died and had abortions because of that. And today we don't have representation of women in STEM. And as Akriti Agrawal quoted, and I find this quote really fantastic, computer programmers today, they are in every single industry of the world. Everyone is using programming, computing, or technology somehow. And still, while half of the US population is female, in the United States, where technology is really everywhere, only 21% of the programmers are women. The people that are basically creating our world are not representative of our world. And this created a huge gender data gap. And I'm going to explain in that what is the gender data gap, but essentially is the fact that we don't have data to explain how women experience society, and the data that we have is biased. So example number 1, does anyone know this example? Yeah, you know about it? So basically, until not so long ago, I think until 2019, if I'm not mistaken, companies making cars didn't have to test how cars crash. They didn't have to test with women's bodies. They would just test the mannequin with a male body. And if they were interested in knowing perhaps how it would work in a woman, they would make the male mannequin a bit smaller and they will put it in the passenger seat. So until the 2019s, car companies essentially didn't really know how a car would react if it crashes and it's a woman driving. And finally, the consequence of that was that women were 73% more likely to be seriously injured in car crashes, and women were 17% more likely to die in car crashes. Yeah, because we didn't include women in this research and women's bodies, women were 17% more likely to die in a car crash. And it's not because they were driving recklessly, no. It's because they didn't have data to adapt the car into a car that would be safer for women. And does anyone know this example? So this is a research from not so long ago, actually from 2022, from the University of Toronto. After this example of the cars came to life, it really sparked a debate. It was a very strong statement, right? Women are 17% more likely to die in car crashes because we don't have data on it. So let's perhaps investigate if women are indeed experiencing life so differently. In 2019, there was also the publication of Invisible Women from Carolina Criado Perez. If you're into reading books or audiobooks, I would highly recommend. Invisible Women from Carolina Criado Perez is a fantastic book which is going to make you very depressed because it shows how there is inequality in every single aspect of the world. Not only in tech, I have focus in tech because I'm coming from STEM, but she looks into the simplest ways in which women have been discriminated and the consequences of it. So researchers said, okay, let's investigate what's happening. And this research from 2022 in University of Toronto realized that women are 32% more likely to die if operated by male surgeons. And this is very recent research, so they are still investigating why women are 32% more likely to die if operated by male surgeons. And I mean, this was no small research. It was 1.3 million patients and 3,000 surgeons. But there are already a few indications that this can be due to bias. For example, that, and this is something that they're still investigating, so don't take it as the truth, but they are looking into bias. Let's say if you go to a doctor and the male doctor is less likely to take your complaint seriously. So if you say, oh, it's hurting here, a male doctor might think that you're exaggerating while a woman might not. So this is fairly new research. It's also a topic that is very complicated because there are no experts out there. This is so new, we're all trying to figure out what it means. But we are seeing all this data and we are seeing all these correlations coming, which are all pointing towards the same direction. Perhaps a little bit of a lighter example, and an example which in fact was interacting a little bit more with artificial intelligence, is that there is a big tech company that decided to automate how they're doing recruiting. I know that we have recruiters in the room and know how difficult it can be to get the perfect CV, the CV in which you're really going to impress and that this person is really going to thrive. So they said, okay, let's try to automate somehow the recruiting process. How are we going to automate the recruiting process? Well, let's get the CVs of everyone that was hired and let's get the CV into an artificial intelligence black box. That's such a great idea, and let's then get all these CVs which are being sent every year, and we pass it through the artificial intelligence model, and it's going to give us the best ones. But what happens is, and we were talking about bias in the beginning, when you're having an interview, the person which is interviewing you can be biased, and I know that today there is a lot more being done in terms of education to try to stop your biases. But imagine if you're interviewing someone and you want to hire this person, and this person actually comes from the same village as you and speaks the same dialect as you, and in fact you even went to school together. These things have nothing to do with skills, but you're just going to interact better with this person, and you're likely to hire this person not because the person is the best for the job, but because you're biased to think, but I'm going to, you know, hang out with this person afterwards and have a beer, that's going to be so cool. These types of biases historically have influenced the way decision was taken, to the point that when they input all these CVs into the model, the CV, the model in this black box way of computing stuff, just said, okay, we don't have CVs of women, or we barely have, so I'm assuming that women are going to be bad. And it was giving minus points whenever you would have women or a woman in your CV. So let's say you won an award, ICT Woman of the Year, you would get punished by that, and your CV would not go forward. And it took them, I think, a year or two to realize that. So for a year or two, they were even getting less female CVs. And we see these stories repeating everywhere. Another story that is interesting, it's from a credit card that decided to also implement AI somehow to give credits to people. And one day on Twitter, someone said, hey, this is such a sexist program. My wife and I fill joint tax returns, live in a community property state, and have been married for a long time. So basically, everything that they earn is in the shared account, everything that they spend is in the shared account. They have exactly the same type of income and expenses, and in fact, if the woman even had a slightly higher credit when she applied for this, but yet the black box algorithm thinks the guy deserved 20 times more credit than the woman did. So when they applied for it, the woman got 20 times less credit. And it's sometimes so difficult to even explain why the algorithms think about that. This is something that I am going to ask Professor here afterwards, because he is doing some very interesting research on AIs that can explain their thinking. Yeah, because today AI still cannot really explain how they're thinking. There was a massive audit trying to understand what happened in this case, because apparently there was not even gender-related data aggregated into this result. So basically, the biased, the biased behaviors of society over and over through the years were so ingrained in the data that it was possible to see this discrepancy even though the gender data was not there. And one of the things that Carolina Criado Perez actually say is that we removed the gender data thinking we were going to make it more equal. But in fact, now we don't have any data to understand what happened there because the inequality is still there. So in fact, we need gender data. This is also a discussion that very often we have also with diversity and inclusion and underrepresented communities. Because we're like, okay, we need to understand how these communities are represented, but we don't have the data because we thought we were protecting them by making them invisible within the data pool. And in fact, the effect was the opposite. So, as you can see, a lot of ethical questions, a lot of questions that still have to be answered, a lot of questions that experts are still trying to answer. And finally, one that I thought it was very interesting, and it was also something that you mentioned, is a Twitter bot that was going to learn from users. So basically, it was a bot that was put online, and people could interact with it on Twitter. And they thought, okay, we're going to put this bot, it's going to learn from people. And in 4 hours, right? In 4 hours, this bot became racist. It was cheering for genocide, and it was making anti-Semitic comments. And within 24 hours, it was forced to be removed out of the internet because people basically abused it. It reminded me a lot of an experiment. It's an experiment from, remind me her name again? Marina Abramovic. I don't know if anyone ever heard about it, Rhythm Zero. Basically, she's an artist that said, okay, I'm going to stand still for 6 hours, I'm not going to move, and I'm going to put on this table a lot of things that you can use with me. And she put flowers, and she put a napkin, and she put something else, and letters, and she also put scissors and a knife and a gun, and people could choose and do whatever they wanted. And in the beginning they were okay, and they were kind, and they were coming to her, and then someone gave a kiss, and then someone turned her around, and they realized that she was not reacting, and then they removed her clothes, and then at some point they were cutting her and putting the gun against her face. So it really made me think about this experiment. If we don't safeguard technology, if we don't make technology safe, and we just put it out there for people to use, it's very possible that people are going to abuse it. So one of the things that people sometimes ask me is, are you against AI? Then are you against technology? And I say, no, I am very pro-technology. I am a scientist, I'm a physician, I'm an engineer, and I work in technology today. But I want it to work for me, and I want it to work properly for me. Because AI has so much potential today to revolutionize, medicine, and how we find, solutions for cancer, how we detect it faster, and so on. I want to be part of it. I don't want to be part of a world which is using AI and technology against me. I want to be part of a world in which is supporting me, and it's supporting everyone around me. So, and especially now that we have technology being in every single industry out there. You have technology in defense, in banking, and insurance, and so on. Imagine if you are a woman applying for a credit, and you're an entrepreneur, and you're opening your company, and your counterpart is going to get 20 times more money to open his company for the simple fact that he is a man. This cannot happen. So I always go to crowds, and especially crowds which are studying, and crowds which are going to become computer scientists and technical people, and I say, keep this in mind. Keep this in mind, because I have already been in rooms in which CIOs and people that were supposed to be very, very knowledgeable had no idea about gender bias. We cannot have this anymore. We need to build a society that is going to protect people, and that is going to thrive, and not that is going to harm us. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's thank Karen again for the. Thanks you. Should we proceed with questions or talk?
Questions.
My questions.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Blanca. I don't know. Always when I'm listening these talks, I'm like a mathematician. I'm confused by the fact that first things first, you mentioned bias, and then very rightly you mentioned correlation. These are the two sides of the same phenomenon, which means that in order for us to learn something, we have to make relations between one entity and the other. You mentioned the cave and the bear, or sorry, you mentioned the sighting of a bear in the front of a cave. For me, the bad news, I don't want to distract from the gender case, but for me the bad news is that today's computing is all what it does is correlation. So I think what must be said is this kind of raising the awareness of how primitive the models are, in spite of all the marketing that we have around them. And when I'm speaking, as a technical person, I'm very aware of this. ChatGPT reached a couple of billions of users in one day due to proper marketing and the wish of the people to gain something what they don't know. So I think it was. I don't know. I can only repeat. It was a great talk of making us think of what can go wrong, and given the circumstances, things will go wrong. So like all the robots. Can I ask a few details? I'm puzzled by this Apple Card incident I did not know about. You said that that they removed any data related to gender, citing of gender. What was though the thing that was indicative of a gender in the case of those two persons?
Hello. So the indication of gender is there were several couples that were married for a really long time, and they had everything together, so their salaries would fall into the same bank account and they would have the same expenses and they have the mortgage together. But when the men would apply for a card, the man would get 20 times more credits than the woman. And this man put it on social media, and he started to get a lot of reactions like, oh, I also did that with my wife, and we also had a discrepancy of 10%, 5%, 15%. And that's when they realized that there was a discrepancy. But then they went to the card company, and the card company said, okay, but we don't differentiate in gender. And that's when people started to realize that the behaviors of a person towards a man and towards a woman were so ingrained into the data that models were able to realize the bias, even though there was no gender-related data.
So if I'm translating into, sorry, I'm a little bit more in this sense. If I'm translating it, is due to the habits that were recorded by the card holder company that could discriminate whether the person who has those habits is a male or is a female, and in spite of the fact that it was no implicit record to the gender, they could discriminate, and based on this discrimination,
yes,
they could discriminate and full stop.
So yeah. Essentially, imagine if I go to a bank and I say, I'm buying an apartment. Bank, can you please give me a loan? And then the bank will be like, okay, yeah, you can get a loan with 2% of credit. And then if my husband goes to the bank and he's like, yeah, I have the same income as someone, the bank will be like, okay, 1.5. And then all these small data, like it's going to look back, wow, one day she got 2% and the average person will get 1.5. So it probably means that she was not very stable or not very good. And these types of behaviors documented over the years, and not only for one person, but also for several people, that led to this this discrepancy.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think this reminds me, and I just like I want to mention something which I personally liked in this presentation, that all the examples were so touchable. They were grounded, and this is in contrast what us computer scientists tend to do, that we speak of some very often abstract concepts, and people or the audience might think that they will be never touched by these. So all the examples that were here, either they were visible or tangible, you were denied the credit, or I just half joke when I was in Nigeria. There was a huge scandal of the face recognition software of the day. It was Google at the time, and those images of girls partying that were from Nigeria, they were recognized as an ape, and it was so strange. And just if I am to comment on the other side of what people like computer scientists tend to think of, is that why not putting more data to it, which have this type of bias corrected? My question would be: do you see this as a remedy, or what other ways can there be?
So the thing is, the models that we have are not yet mature enough. And one thing is you doing this research in a controlled environment, and the other thing is you exposing this to the public. Because as I said, once you expose this to the public, it has a huge reach, and it replicates these biases everywhere. So indeed, when you're training models, you can have these types of mistakes. You also have the mistake of an AI not being able to differentiate a cookie and a pincher, which is a dog. So this is also a very popular case that you can, if you just research, you can see it became a meme. Is this a cookie or a pincher? But these are not essentially harmful.
Yep.
But the thing is, the problem is when it becomes harmful. When you put some chatbots out there that is going, every time that you say, I don't know, give me give me an image of someone looking poor, and it's going to show always the person with the same origin. Or for example, there was a case that became very famous in Belgium recently of a chatbot that was supposed to act like a psychologist, but something went wrong and this chatbot told the guy to kill himself because it was not worth it, and finally he did it. So I think the issue here is that we are putting things in the market and exploiting things which are not optimal, which are not ready to be in contact with society, and these are creating these types of harmful things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we have a lot of cases not only on gender bias but also on racial issues. We have one that is very famous, which is the racist soap dispenser, in which basically a person with a black hand tried to get some soap, and the soap dispenser wouldn't recognize the hands because the sensors were not trained for black hands. I typically don't dive into this topic because as a white person I don't feel entitled to talk about it, but of course it's things that we should raise awareness as well. The bias is affecting not only women, but it's affecting minorities, and it's affecting all the people which are not building society. Yeah. It's a much broader topic indeed.
Yes, and I think it's just I'm going backwards in your presentation. I mean, along the ideas of your presentation. A particularly interesting slide was the representation of women in STEM. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So that's what girls, at least here in Romania, they are told that they are, the guys they are much better at, which I think is deeply wrong. Just they have less encouragement. And I checked that with the university as is today in Romania, it is at about 20%, so it's slightly better, marginally better. I don't think we are outside of this great average. What do you think can be done? I mean, what are the approaches? I mean, obviously you are an outlier from that, or in that sense you are in that. So how can more women go into the side?
There are a lot of ways to respond to that, and actually there's a very long answer as well. But in short, one of the things that I notice is that since you're a child, you already put somehow into boxes. So if you have a girl, you're typically giving her Barbies, and you're giving her a kitchen to play with, and you're giving her a trolley. And if it's a guy, you're giving cars or something to work with construction or some tools. And these things already make an influence in the way you're growing up. And I remember even myself when I was a child and I was telling my parents that I wanted how do you translate that? I wanted the car wash from Hot Wheels, and they would be like, Hot Wheels car wash, it's not a girl's thing. And finally I had a brother, and my brother got the car wash, and then I could play with it. And then I was super happy about it. And I sometimes joke to people that I'm an engineer because I had a brother and I could play with all his stuff. Yeah. But I see that since a very, very, very young age, we are already conditioned to being a girl, and to wearing pink, and to behaving in a certain way, and not speaking too loud, and not being too confrontational, and this and that and that. And all these things can shape you as a person. And if you top that with professionals which are professions which are male-oriented, which you should behave in a way that you shouldn't behave, Just imagine an entrepreneur or a salesperson that needs to be out there, that needs to be outspoken. These are qualities that very often are frowned upon. So all these small behaviors, small inequalities, these can all lead to one day we're having only 18% of women in computer science.
Wow. Okay. Thanks. It just reminded me. In my impression, actually, I think we might discuss it. Or what is your opinion about the claim that today, with this STEM teaching or the friendliness towards STEM, is somehow similar with the way girls were getting away from mathematics and STEM. What do I mean? With this huge marketing companies and the ChatGPT coming, there's this common knowledge that, the common belief that well, you don't have to study, everything is on the internet, and you only have to do what? You only have to search. You only have to. Essentially, my message is that it is not for you. Doing mathematics is not for you. Doing the cosine transform is not for you. Doing integrals is not for you. And I see a very similar pattern developing. Like it's like a personal experience. I think I should also tell that is that people are getting less and less friendly with mathematics. The way, as you were saying, that like people were discouraging you from playing with car washing with the Hot Wheels. You know?
Yeah, well, this is a question that I had when I was a student, right? So when I went to university, I wanted to use the calculator, and my professor would say, no way, you need to calculate everything by hand. And I'm talking about calculations of 3 or 4 pages. I mean, you know how it is. And I was really like, why would we do that if we have calculators? And the same thing people are saying today, why would we write texts if we have GPT to help us? And I think the question remains the same, that we need to understand how things work so we can make them work. Of course, at some point, who is going to be creating things and who is going to deeply understand technology if we are so used to having everything in the palm of our hands? So I see learning mathematics and learning how to code as knowing how art is made behind the scenes. And this is something that is always going to be challenged in a way. I mean, it's not because now you have computers that people are going to challenge mathematics for the first time. They were already challenging with calculators 30 years ago.
Yep.
We need to always show that it's important to understand how things work, that is also going to trigger the way you're thinking, and that is even going to be something that is going to inspire and challenge you. You don't want a society in which everything is going to come very easy and you're not going to have the critical thinking and the creative thinking. Mathematics is also a way of making you think in a different way. I haven't been very challenged on mathematics, but perhaps because I am not a math teacher. So I haven't really dealt with this with this type of comment, but that's what I would say in case someone would challenge me with that.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's I don't know, and also when it comes, and I'm just a closing remark before letting the audience ask the questions. It's very funny. Probably what was happening with this Apple Card. I'm just keep digesting that issue, that like people were denied essentially based on some behavior, class or behavior that was the gender was hidden. Probably it went through some black box machine, and this black box machine produced some features, and those features were driving the mechanism that was deciding on the amount and on the risk of the person who was going for the loan. I think this is it's a personal opinion that this is deeply wrong, because the engineers were not understanding the main reasons. They were only hoping that the data that they putting inside, it will drive the system so that the behavior, it will be good, and they had the definition of the good, that it will behave as the others, as it was behaving for the masses. And the fact that the masses were largely men who were getting loans, who were braver to get loans, it was determining today's women to getting less loans. So I think it's, I don't know if, okay, I think it was this time.
Yeah, but then it brings to my question, if I may ask, because I also, I'm very interested in the research that you have of how artificial intelligence can explain what it's doing. So if you want to share a little bit to the audience.
So, okay, I was discussing with Karen and the audience during the lunch, like what one can do as a practicing of someone who practices artificial intelligence, what are the issues, what are the hot topics of today. And one of the hot topics is precisely that, there are all types of biases and all types of correlations. Some of them we want to exploit, some of them we want to act against. And what artificial intelligence and these machines that are put on some metal pieces, what they can do is to learn this correlation, and they learn in this correlation irrespective of their smell, irrespective whether ethically they are good or bad. And what we're doing with a company at our university, we try to say something like classification. Let's just now think of a classification of someone, whether are you allowed to get the loan or not, of classification that you done with a model which is self-explainable. Now I'm warning that this self-explainability in terms of the mathematical term, if you are a little bit more rigorous about finding out what are the root causes of the decision, there's still a gap, but this huge black box is possibly now what we try to divide into sub-pieces and saying, this part we do understand and we do have the responsibility that the decision is made logically. I'm emphasizing logical and as opposed to ethical, because the ethics, I don't think the computer scientists or mathematicians, they can code it. So I hope I answer that. By self-explainability, what we mean is we try to be models that act against this type of biases. But you see the contradiction if you want to say acting against, but still you are learning to do, you're doing, the mechanism is for. So it's a tricky road.
It's very tricky, and there are a lot of ethical conversations around it, because one of the ways to stop the bias in artificial intelligence is to actually feed biased data, but the bias towards how you would like to see society acting. So how do you do a bias correction, which is like how they call it? Essentially, you can act against if you have underrepresented, like if you have some poor people underrepresented in the loans. Mathematically, what you can do is making small variation on the data. You're making it more data. You're creating more data. You're faking more data, and that somehow it's next to the correlation that the machine will learn. It will learn your hope that you want those people who were underrepresented to be more represented. With this issue, it comes the warning that whatever you do not think it might happen, those will certainly not happen. So it is somehow against the society's, well, if you're thinking beneficial, it's like this self-regulatory mechanisms. I don't know whether I corrected. So can we just turn to the audience and ask whether they have questions? What are your thoughts?
To Karen or yes. Yes.
Related to the self-regulatory,
Yeah.
so if we have data which is already biased and we would like to correct or in a way manipulate this data, wouldn't that touch some ethical questions related to the usage of the AI tool that we are going to give to the world.
Yeah, of course. But that's why I say that today AI is a very ethical discussion. And this also goes back to what we were discussing during lunch of the 6 or 9 paradox. Because if I draw a 6 here on the table, for you it's going to be a 9, for me it's going to be a 6. And we can discuss who is right and who is wrong, but we are both right just from our own perspectives. And you also have these types of ethical questions being applied to artificial intelligence. So in fact, I joke sometimes that the AI people are the new philosophers of society. Yes, it's becoming some kind of philosophy. What is right? What is wrong? How do we correct what is biased by making it biased? It's a very complicated topic, and that's why nobody today wants to be called an expert on this topic, because it's dangerous to say that you know everything. Nobody knows everything, and even if you know things, they might not be correct to someone else. It became some kind of philosophical discussion as well. So I'm pretty sure that every major company today has huge ethical boards which are looking into how to best do it, and depending on which geography, which country, which type of politics you have, you're going to come to different answers, and which one is going to be correct is going to be highly depending on philosophy and ethics. So super complicated topic indeed.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, the day before yesterday, we were discussing with like a local company who does image generation. I don't know whether probably it's like the ChatGPT style. You asking a question and then the machine answers. Similarly, what they're doing, you put a query saying, "I want a picture of a lady with a chair." Or with a trolley for her kid, and there was a lot of wrong images because probably the training data was not correct for that purpose. What I do want to emphasize with this is that first, what was the answer of the CEO of this product owner of the company? I said, well, I will look into that issue, and the way he defined looking into the issue, said, I have to get more pictures with the wheels on. I said, is this correct? And the second is that, of course, you cannot have as many images added to a system as many new ideas might arise. So it's you have to play that game. And the reason why I was kind of asking Karen about what does she think about STEM or raising critical thinking, or raising like the drive towards understanding things, is precisely this, that might be some other ways to do that, not adding data.
Yes, probably data correction or data quality is still a huge question mark.
That is indeed, yes. So, other questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the presentation and also the discussion part. I was wondering that it seemed to me that from your perspective, or from the perspective of the critics of these results, in general we can say that gender equality is always better than gender inequality, or by default we consider that that is something what we wish for. And we see the data, for example, in persons in jail are 80-90% of males. It would be strange to argue that we need more female in jails.
I hope not.
Also, I'm coming from the legal profession, and in our country, in the legal profession, there are more female. Around 70% of the professionals are female. it would be strange to argue that we need less female in this profession. So my question is that, is there acceptable gender inequality at the level of results on one hand? If there is such a thing, what is the criteria of acceptability? And it seems to me, and this is only a commentary, it seems to me that at this moment we consider that equality of opportunity is not enough to be fair anymore. So I'm looking for your answer.
Yeah, you know, you're not the first person to pose this question about jail. And in the first time I made a theory on stage, and afterwards I looked a little bit more in depth, because of course I don't want to be creating theories and quoting things which are not true. But it did, I did find quite a bit of data saying that in fact people are more likely to take harder penalties against men than against women. And this can be one of the reasons why the population incarcerated is so largely men than women. It was not going to be 50-50 if it was fair. There are other things related to it in terms of men and hormones and violence and so on. But it is a fact that very often men are judged more harshly because they're men, and women are not judged as harshly. So bias is everywhere, and I don't think that the lack of bias is going to make things 50-50, but every sort of data can be challenged. So the fact that there is more men incarcerated than women can be challenged as well. It's a topic that it's still under construction, right? But then I think that we always tend to look into how we are going to make things better for a population rather than how we're going to make things harder or worse for a population. So the question should not be we have X amount of people in jail, or we have X amount of people in a profession, but what are the consequences of it? Is it harming to have more women in legal or more women in marketing? Is it harmful? Is it harmful for men? Perhaps it's not. And if it's not so harmful, maybe there are things that we should investigate more thoroughly than that. So I think a lot of the focus right now on gender equality, specifically in STEM, is because it has been found out that the lack of gender equality is harming society. And perhaps there is some harms in other professions as well. It's an evolving topic, but I would say that at least this is my point of view, that we are looking towards what we can do better and not what we can do worse. Does that answer your question?
Let me put another question. So you say that this harmfulness would be the criteria when is acceptable or unacceptable gender inequality?
What I'm saying is that the focus towards gender equality is when gender inequality is causing harm to society. So if there is a specific profession in which there are more men or more women, and this is not causing harm to society, there are other topics in which we should tackle which are causing harm to society.
Okay.
Can I add to that? I think it was very good example, both yours and what Karen was saying. Very often what is dealt with is statistics, is empiricism. So what you see here with the 18%, it means that only 2 out of 10 people are women in computer science. So only 2 out of 10 who are getting into a company, they will be women. I was telling when we had the lunch with Karen that we were at the university. We have something which we call collective project. It's the first taste of the computer scientists, how they will work. and they will work in groups, and the empirical finding, what we had during 10 years, 100 students every year, is that if there is no gender balance, at least as much as it can be, out of if there were two girls, the group was successful. If there were no girls, the chances of this group getting something done wrong was higher. So I can only add to this empirical looking at the way society, in a very small case and a very particular way. I'm speaking of computer scientists. So the way society behaves is good to put the question marks. You mentioned the jail. There was some very wishful thinking when people were looking at data of a neighborhood where robbery happened, and they were thinking of putting more reinforcement, low reinforcement there, where robbery happened. So what was happening, that they were increasingly selecting people from poor neighborhoods who went into the jail. So it was again a bias against a particular layer of society. I don't know, being a computer scientist, I could explain this well enough. But I think here or at least in my side and in my view, we're only raising the awareness of what can go wrong, and based on the correlation and on the working of a computer, what can go wrong, it will eventually go wrong. So I don't know whether I added to this to your point. So I don't know, other questions or issues, discussion points? Thanks, András. Blanca?
I hit my ears what you said, that you cannot code ethics.
Sorry?
You said right at the end that you can't, you're not sure if you will ever be able to code ethics. Can you explain that to me? Because it hit me hard. Never can code ethics into AI?
I don't know whether, let's see how well can I explain my thoughts.
To a person not in IT.
Sorry?
To a person not in IT, like?
Yeah, or the first question when it comes to ethics is whether a computer can think or cannot think. There was a common saying, and this was John von Neumann János, who was like when he was passing to Los Alamos, and the people were discussing whether 1956, whether a computer will be able to think. The answer, what Neumann said, that can you provide me the specification, because I will build that computer, and he said it in passing, and this claim ever since it is true, that if you can define something, if there's a mathematical definition to that, it can be done. The way these language models and what we see, the correlation-based adaptation, the correlation-based learning works, is based on something which we call the loss function, and that loss function means that you have to say what is good in terms of this empirical stuff for every single possible point, what will be good. And then it comes also that it's very hard to define what is ethical, because as you often see in the specifically, I'm not a lawyer, and I only look at those people who making the laws. There are a lot of things that you never thought of, and people exploiting. So the same with ethics. There are a lot of rules which you never thought of concretizing. I saw a TEDx talk about the janitors in the U.S. Hospitals, that the amount of work they're doing is nothing, is a lot more than what is on the specification on their worksheet, and the rest, what is not specified, they do it of their will of doing good. So I view the issue of computers and learning computers, making computers to adapt, very similarly. The computers are minimalistic in that sense. When they're not told to do something, they won't do it. When they are not told to ignore the gender, they will not do it. So, like, again, Karen's talk was very good in raising something which the societies will touch. But just to come away and one more step and two more steps away, there's a lot of images that contain cats, that have cats on their content. The question is, what do you think makes the computer guess whether there's a cat on the image? I mean, if you think of it, yeah, the cat, it has some eyes, it has some long legs, it has a specific look. Actually, the computers, what they think is a cat is that whether there's a grass. So they only look at patches of green in the image. Whenever there's a patch of green in the image, it's categorized as grass. And this is concrete in as far as there was a dog recognition contest, and the computer went crazy because some insane people they painted the dog green. So, and it was completely lost. And the second was a kind of a more to the reality of how computers work. There's a competition of the melanoma, whether it's benign or not, based on a picture, whether they can say it. It's a very common mistake was that all the how to say, is it benign or malefic? What's the other? The melanoma that can cause cancer, that is called malefic.
Melanoma?
Yeah. This is there are two types. One that you can leave on, and the other which you have to remove.
Benign and cancerogen.
And cancerogen. Okay. So the issue that whether it was cancerogen or not was detected based on the fact that for every melanoma which was cancerogen, next to it, it was attached a measure like a millimeter scratches or millimeter paintings to the image saying what is the length of that. Or just, okay, I don't know whether you understood, so, okay. I don't know.
Well, I am a little bit more optimistic about having ethics embedded into code. I think there is a lot of effort now also in trying to create what they call trust layers, in which, long story short, just think about a layer in between what you're giving to the AI and what the AI is learning. So a trusted person will train the AI, and at some point the AI keeps learning from what people are inputting, but there is some kind of layer that filters like, oh, okay, this is bad, you should probably not learn from it, and this is okay, you can learn from it. And there is a lot of effort now trying to perfect these trust layers. So I see this a little bit as trying to embed ethics into coding. So at some point we can have machine learning models which are learning in an ethical way. But of course, this is relatively recent research. It's something that it's picking up now also because of the amount of data that we are managing to collect since recent years. But I think we are still looking into the infancy of AI and machine learning. That when we look back 20 years in the future into this talk today, saying that we might never be able to put ethics in AI, we're going to laugh at it like people laughed when people didn't believe internet would ever pick up. So one of the things that are universal in technology is that it's very difficult to make future statements. It's very difficult to predict where it's going to go, because I think it has been proven over and over again that technology can become limitless. But it was also proven over and over again that it can become completely BS, pardon my French, but I don't hear anybody talking about the metaverse anymore since a time. So there are a lot of things that are hype, there are a lot of things that are marketing, a lot of things that are created by, I don't know, corporations to generate funds and so on. And there are a lot of things that are serious, and eventually we're going to figure out which things were serious and which things actually worked and helped society, which ones didn't. But at this point, making statements of this is never going to happen or this is for sure going to happen, it's something that I avoid at all costs.
Yep, agree. Sorry if it was too negative. I think I would agree to what Karen was saying. So let's see whether there are other questions or some remarks. One more question. I don't have a chocolate. I don't have cake. So, if not, should we close?
Let's
thank.
call.
Sorry.
Let's call. Anyone?
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for the
Thank you very
presentation.
much.
Thanks,
Really,
Karen.
it was great.